What happens when the enemy isn't across an ocean or protected by a border, but it's right next door? Civil wars are among the most brutal conflicts humanity has ever faced, and they are civil in name only. They don't just tear countries apart, they can impact the entire world. And on today's episode of the Infographics Show, we are about to reveal some of the deadliest and most influential civil wars in history, wars so violent they forever changed the course of history. 10. Caesar's Civil War. In 50 BC, few individuals on earth held as much power as Julius Caesar. At the time, Rome wasn't even an empire yet, it was a republic, governed by a senate rather than a singular leader. Caesar, a highly accomplished and revered military leader, had gained immense respect after his victories in Gaul, a 10-year campaign that subdued a region we now know as modern-day France, parts of Western Germany, and Belgium. His soldiers were loyal not to Rome, but to Caesar himself. During his conquest, Caesar had amassed great wealth and power, using the loot from his victories and his position as the Roman governor of Gaul to hire political agents and further solidify his standing. And back home, while he wasn't the first emperor of Rome, he had aspiration to become one. However, his ambition was met with fierce opposition from other prominent Roman figures, most notably the general Gnaeus Pompeius Magnus, or Pompey, who did not want Rome to transition from a republic to an empire. The tensions between the two men boiled over in 49 BC, when Pompey and his allies in the Senate demanded Caesar relinquish his provinces and armies. In an unprecedented act of defiance, Caesar marched his soldiers across the Rubicon River into Roman territory, sparking an all-out civil war. The battle lines were drawn between Caesar's loyal legions and those defending the Republic. Over the next 5 years, Caesar systematically crushed the Senate's armies, including those led by Pompey himself. While there may have been civil wars with even steeper body counts, the impact of Caesar's civil war cannot be overstated. It reshaped Europe, spreading Roman language, laws, and technology. It also marked the end of the Roman Republic, paving the way for a hereditary monarchy, an empire ruled by an emperor whose position would be passed to a successor. Sadly, Caesar never lived to see this transformation, as he was assassinated by his own friends before the full consequences of his actions could unfold. The echoes of Caesar's war would reverberate through the centuries, leaving a profound legacy on history. 9. The English Civil War. The English Civil War wasn't just a single conflict, it was a series of brutal wars fought between 1642 and 1651. At first glance, it may have seemed like any other war, with pikes, cannons, cavalry, and the emergence of gunpowder. But this was no ordinary war. It wasn't a fight between rival kings over land or titles, it was personal. The war was driven by King Charles I's unpopular taxes and his autocratic rule. It didn't pit one nation against another, it tore England apart from within. On one side were the royalists, those loyal to the monarchy, who believed the king should have unchecked power and wealth. Opposing them were the parliamentarians, who sought a balance of power between parliament and the king. The parliamentarians eventually triumphed in the First English Civil War, capturing King Charles and forcing his son, also named Charles, into exile. What followed was the brief establishment of the Commonwealth of England, a short-lived republic, the only time England has ever been without a monarchy. But the Commonwealth proved unsustainable due to political divisions within the parliamentarians. Charles II, the exiled son of Charles I, was crowned King of Scotland, and this led to the Anglo-Scottish War, which the parliamentarians won once again in 1651. The Royalists lost over 50,000 men, while the parliamentarians lost just over 34,000. With Ireland and Scotland incorporated into the Commonwealth, the British Isles were united, and England would go on to create a constitutional monarchy, a system where Parliament holds all the power, but the monarch still retains some authority, as long as it aligns with the country's constitution. This shift was monumental, shaping England's future and influencing the laws of the United States. It played a pivotal role in sparking the American Revolutionary War in the 1770s. 8. The Spanish Civil War. In 1936, Spain was thrown into turmoil when authoritarian right-wing General Francisco Franco led a military coup against Spain's Republican government. When Franco's forces failed to seize control, conservative elements within Spain rallied behind him, sparking a bitter conflict between the rebels now called the Nationalists and the Spanish Republicans. The Spanish Civil War didn't just impact Spain, it became a testing ground for the horrors that would later define World War II. Franco's rebels received significant support from Nazi Germany and Fascist Italy, turning Spain into a controlled laboratory for the military tactics these powers would later deploy on the global stage. The Nazis, particularly, sent forces to Spain, where they carried out devastating aerial bombardments, much like the Luftwaffe would later use in their campaign against the Allies. Though the Spanish Civil War didn't claim as many lives as World War II, the death toll was still substantial, around 250,000 people. The war also brought about the rise of Franco as Spain's dictator, a position he held until 1975. The Spanish Civil War serves as a grim reminder of what can happen when far-right militant groups gain momentum and face little to no resistance. 7. The American Civil War. While the Spanish Civil War laid the groundwork for future global conflict, the American Civil War showcased what warfare would look like in the industrial age. It heralded the rise of artillery, railway supply lines, and breech-loaded rifles, and the level of destruction was unprecedented for its time. The American Civil War began in 1861, when Southern states sought to preserve the institution of slavery. In response to the election of President Abraham Lincoln, these states seceded from the Union and formed the Confederate States of America. The first shots were fired when the Confederacy attacked the United States fort, igniting a bloody conflict that would last 4 years. In total, the Union, comprising northern and western states, lost around 360,000 soldiers, while the Confederacy suffered approximately 260,000 to 290,000 deaths. These numbers, when including the wounded and missing, skyrocket. The Union ultimately triumphed in 1865, abolishing slavery and reincorporating the southern states back into the Union. This conflict not only left a deep scar on the nation but also set the stage for a more powerful federal government. 6. The Vietnam War. Vietnam wasn't just a civil war between nationalist South Vietnam and communist North Vietnam. It was a proxy war between the United States and the Soviet Union during the Cold War. Following the end of French colonial rule, Vietnam was split into two parts, with the North becoming communist and the South remaining nationalist. As tensions escalated, the United States sided with the South, while the Soviet Union and China supported the North. The Vietnam War turned into one of the deadliest and most devastating conflicts of the Cold War. In 1965, the U.S. became directly involved, but quickly learned that they were fighting against an enemy that used the rugged Vietnamese landscape to their advantage. Despite significant U.S. firepower, the North Vietnamese and their guerrilla forces fought with unmatched resilience, and the war soon turned into a grueling test of endurance. By the time the U.S. pulled out in 1975, millions had died. The U.S. suffered tremendous losses, with around 58,000 soldiers killed. The death toll in Vietnam was even higher, with estimates ranging up to 3 million. The Vietnam War left deep scars, not just in Vietnam but also in the U.S., where it became a symbol of the dangers of military intervention. 5. The Nigerian Civil War. The Nigerian Civil War began in 1967, sparked by ethnic and economic inequality, particularly the oppression of the Igbo people in southeastern Nigeria. Following Nigeria's independence in 1960, tensions grew between the country's ethnic groups, and after a series of military coups, the Igbo people declared independence and formed the Republic of Biafra. The Nigerian government, supported by much of the international community, including the UK and the Soviet Union, fought against Biafra. The war resulted in massive casualties, with estimates ranging from 500,000 to 3 million deaths. The Biafran airlift, a humanitarian effort to deliver aid to the starving Biafran people, was a pivotal moment, inspiring the formation of organizations like Doctors Without Borders. Sadly, Biafra surrendered in 1970, and the state was reincorporated into Nigeria. The war left an indelible mark on the country, and the scars of the conflict are still felt today. 4. The Korean War. When the dust settled after World War II, Korea was divided into two occupation zones, the North controlled by the Soviet Union, and the South under the influence of the United States. By the 1950s, North Korea, led by the dictator Kim Il-sung, sought to reunify the country under communism. Backed by China and the Soviet Union, the North invaded the South on June 25, 1950, setting off the Korean War. The United States, in support of South Korea, intervened militarily, bringing a new global dimension to the conflict. The war would soon escalate into a bloody confrontation that saw millions of lives lost. The death toll from the war was staggering, around 3 million people, with North Korea suffering more than 1.5 million casualties. South Korea lost nearly 1 million, while the United States and China each lost several 100,000 soldiers. What made the Korean War so devastating was the level of destruction. The airstrikes, artillery, and battles between the United Nations and communist forces were unlike anything the Korean Peninsula had ever seen. The fighting would eventually end in a stalemate in 1953, with the country still divided to this day. The Korean War didn't just reshape the Korean Peninsula, it also intensified the Cold War, laying the groundwork for future conflicts. The division of North and South Korea persists as a powerful reminder of the ideological battles that shaped the 20th century. The war is a testament to the resilience of the Korean people, but it also remains a painful chapter in global history. 3. The Second Congo War. The Second Congo War, which began in 1998, became one of the deadliest conflicts in modern African history. Though it began as a rebellion led by Laurent Kabila to overthrow President Mobutu Sese Seko, the war quickly spiraled out of control, involving several neighboring African nations. The root of the conflict lay in ethnic tensions between the Hutu and Tutsi peoples, compounded by economic disparities and long-standing grievances. What made this war unique was how it drew in 9 different African countries, each with their own interests. Angola, Namibia, Chad, Sudan, and Zimbabwe supported the Congolese government, while Rwanda, Uganda, and Burundi backed the rebel forces. The involvement of so many nations turned the war into a full-blown regional conflict, with millions of lives at stake. The war's human cost was staggering. It claimed the lives of an estimated 5.4 million people, with a significant portion of the casualties being civilians. Beyond the violence of the fighting, disease, malnutrition, and the destruction of infrastructure contributed to the immense death toll. Genocides and atrocities committed by armed militias further exacerbated the suffering, leaving a lasting mark on the region. The war's most profound legacy was its impact on the people of the Congo, as well as the international response to the humanitarian crisis. The Biafran Airlift, a humanitarian mission to deliver aid to the starving people of Biafra, inspired the formation of international organizations like Doctors Without Borders. Though Laurent Kabila was assassinated during the war, his son Joseph Kabila took over and sought peace. But the war's consequences would continue to be felt for years to come, and even today, the Democratic Republic of the Congo remains in turmoil. 2. The Chinese Civil War. While Europe was still reeling from the effects of World War I, China was embroiled in its own struggle. The Chinese Civil War, which began in 1927, pitted the Kuomintang Nationalist Party against the Communist Party of China. Initially, the nationalists appeared to have the upper hand, but the communists, led by Mao Zedong, retreated to the Shaanxi province, where they regrouped. The tide turned when World War II took precedence. With both sides suspending their civil war to fight the Japanese invaders, the communists gained valuable experience and resources. After Japan's defeat, the Civil War resumed, and the Communist Party emerged victorious. With Soviet support, Mao and the Communists secured the mainland, while the Nationalists were forced to flee to Taiwan, where they established the Republic of China. The war's toll was horrific. An estimated 9 million people lost their lives, with both sides committing atrocities. The conflict transformed China, leading to the establishment of the People's Republic of China under Mao. Taiwan, meanwhile, remains an independent nation. The unresolved tensions between the two regions persist to this day, and the war's outcome shaped the geopolitical landscape of East Asia for decades. 1. The Russian Civil War. In 1917, the Russian Empire was in turmoil, and the Bolsheviks, led by Vladimir Lenin, seized power during the October Revolution. But their rise was met with fierce resistance from conservative forces, and the Russian Civil War broke out. The White Army, consisting of various political factions opposed to Bolshevism, fought against the Red Army, the Bolshevik forces that sought to solidify their control over Russia. What followed was a brutal, bloody struggle. The White Army received support from several foreign countries, including the United States, but it was not enough to stop the Bolshevik advance. The Civil War lasted from 1917 to 1922 and caused the deaths of an estimated 7 to 12 million people, many of them civilians. The Russian Civil War changed the face of the country. After the Bolsheviks triumphed, they transformed the Russian Empire into the Soviet Union, a socialist state that would dominate the global stage for much of the 20th century. The conflict marked the end of the Romanov dynasty and the beginning of a new era, one defined by Marxist ideology, authoritarian rule, and the eventual emergence of superpower rivalry during the Cold War. The Russian Civil War's brutality, the rise of communism, and the collapse of the old order had a profound impact on the world. The scars of this conflict continue to influence global politics, and its violent legacy is still felt today.